Welcome to the Knicks Film School Postgame Show, powered by our friends at BetUS. Thank fucking God, it feels so good to beat that bag of douche. Oh, man. Here's to you, Joel. Welcome back to playing professional basketball. Only the best for you, my man. That's a shame. Couldn't come away with a win. Well, your loss is the Knicks gain. Nice comeback after a night against the Indiana Pacers that I don't think anybody felt very good about, right? Like, that was, we've had some rough post games here over the years. Goodness knows I've perhaps poked the bear a little bit on some of them along the way, defending certain people who were maybe not worth being defended at the time. But I think there were just a lot of frustrated people, a lot of frustrated Knicks fans coming off of that Indiana game. And it wasn't just because the Knicks were under 500, and it wasn't just because they had lost 3 of 4, and those 3 losses, and even if you want to go back to the Cavs loss, or the Boston loss for that matter, all featured different things that, if you wanted to extrapolate them out, were causes for larger concerns, right? We're not just, we're going to chalk this up to a new team finding chemistry. No, it was, well, do we have a fundamental problem of, can you play Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5 defensively, and survive that way? And did we trade 6 first-round picks for a guy who, we're not even sure he's one of the 5 players that should be on the floor for the majority of the game, with the way that Mikal was playing. And then, you look at Jaylen Brunson and some of his ups and downs, although he certainly had some good games before tonight. We're going to talk about Jaylen Brunson. What an interesting night from Jaylen Brunson. Mostly just happy he's okay. And then he came back in the game after turning his ankle. But I think, and this is kind of what I keep going back to, which is, it's obviously it's my theme of the first 10 games, which is that development, just like development in players is not linear, development in teams is not linear. And I don't think it's fair to look at this Knicks team and put it, I think it was maybe Hush who put it this way on the last post game, and be like, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. That's not how it works. You are building a foundation to something that is brand new. And for as much as Brunson is still here, and Hart is still here, and Deuce is still here, and OG is still here, and a couple other guys are still here, the way they overhauled this roster and the changes that that overhaul necessitated in their play style and their roles and responsibilities up and down the roster, that's a sea change. That is a sea change. That is a foundation overhaul. And I think when you do something like that, you're going to have nights when it clicks, and you're going to have nights when it doesn't click. And I think tonight was such a fascinating game because through 3 quarters, you definitely had a lot of stuff that was clicking. And then you definitely had a lot of stuff that was not clicking, and we could talk about all of it. I mean, pretty briefly. I mean, in terms of the not clicking, I think I definitely looked at the stat at halftime, and I'm pretty sure this stat remained true throughout the third quarter. The Knicks had taken, it was definitely true after halftime, the Knicks had taken a bunch more shots than the 76ers, like double digits more shots than the 76ers. And they were shooting a double-digit higher percentage. And it's not even like the Sixers were hitting threes. The Knicks weren't hitting threes either, but the Sixers weren't really hitting threes. And yet, this was whatever it was at halftime, a 4-point game. And yeah, you could look to the free throws and you want to say, okay, the Knicks defended with their hands too much and they sent the Sixers to the line. But it wasn't just that. It was, Sixers tipping up a lot of balls around their basket that led to second opportunities. And it was the nature of the turnovers. These weren't turnovers that you make when there are some turnovers that are positive turnovers where it's like, okay, they're trying to work the ball around and they got a little too cute. No. These were, did you go out drinking before the game type turnovers? They were just brutal. And then what we thought was bad throughout the first half, it only increased throughout the third quarter. So we got to this point at the beginning of the fourth quarter where this was a 3-point game that felt like it should be at least a 13-point game, if not a 20-point margin in favor of the Knicks. And you looked at it and you say, well, I like their process on offense. I kind of like what they're doing on defense. I would argue this was as good a defensive showing as the Knicks have had all year. Granted, the 76ers, much like the Bucks, much like all the teams that they have looked good defensively against this season, these Sixers are not – this is not a powerhouse team because, Joel was not Joel tonight. I'll continue to make fun of him, but, like, the guy clearly is not – I don't even know. Is he 60%, 65%? Whatever the hell he is. He's not what he's going to be, probably. Paul George was on fire. That dude was unbelievable. And no Maxi, obviously. And Maxi, I kind of wondered if Maxi wasn't their most important player before the season began, and he missed the game. So I want to put it in context, but you still had to like what they were doing on both ends through three quarters, and yet you were so frustrated because you're like, oh my God, how is this not a blowout? And then what happened in the fourth quarter? What happened in the fourth quarter is the Knicks team that I think so many people have been upset that they haven't seen this year because they feel like they watched it night in and night out last year. The team that makes all the big plays and gets all the big stops and makes all the big shots and makes the smart passes and doesn't force shots and takes care of the ball and gets the big rebounds and does all the things that you expect teams to do who are winning teams, and this team through 9 games this year, they were much more of a team that found ways to lose as opposed to found ways to secure victories. So to see the team through the fourth quarter, they had 0 turnovers in the fourth quarter. So there's that. I would argue that as far as their offensive process in the fourth quarter, pretty exemplary, save for like there were maybe a couple of possessions late where I was like, guys, the game's not over yet. Let's be a little more careful here, or be a little bit more purposeful with what we're doing. But save for a couple of those things, the offensive execution was everything that you wanted. They checked all the boxes. We were talking, Jason Meredith, shout out to my guy, Jason, who was on halftime Zoom, for all the Knicks Film School newsletter subscribers, lamenting the fact that this is not a team that won on the margins. What did they do in the fourth quarter? They won on the margins. And yes, defensively, and look, the Sixers gave him a big assist. The Sixers were not good in the fourth quarter. For the most part, they made some pushes, they made some big plays, they made some big shots, but there was not enough of that. And but even so, give the Knicks credit for forcing their hand and making a lot of plays and not giving the Sixers. And this is the key for me, right? They did not give the Sixers a chance ultimately to steal this game. And that is what they did against the Hawks. They gave the Hawks a chance to steal the game. And against Indiana, they gave Indiana, not steal the game. They gave Indiana a chance to run away with the game. So 5-5 after 10 games. I think if you're a reasonable Knicks fan, especially when you looked at the schedule when it came out, and especially after the opening night result, which was probably predictable, to end up 5-5 after the first 10, I think you kind of got to sign for it and be like, yeah, you know what? Let's move on. Let's continue along and move on to the next stretch of the season or the next stretch of 10 games and see if we can't move it up to 6-4 or even 7-3 in the next 10 games and continue to progress from there. That's the hope, and that's the path to 50 plus wins, which should still absolutely be the goal. For as much as they've struggled and for as uneven as they've looked, this team should still absolutely win 50 games and be, at this point, you'd look at the East, the way the East is shaken out, be a top 3 seed. And I think you saw a lot of great things tonight. One thing I haven't done yet, and I've been talking for over 10 minutes, is I haven't mentioned any specific players by name other than in passing. And that's somewhat purposeful because I really do think that this was a collective team effort. Like, there were outstanding outstanding performances by several Knicks tonight. OG Anunoby, man, I've heard, I feel like some people are talking about him in an all NBA context, not all defense, all NBA context. I can't get there. I'll give you all defense. I don't, could he be in the, like, could he make an all-star team this year? I mean, the Knicks would have to win a lot of games between now and when the coaches, ultimately pick the reserves for that team. But the way he's playing, I know Paul George went off tonight for a little bit, and OG Anunoby was on him on some of those possessions. Those are just tip your cap. Like, that was Paul George at his best. I mean, he's a top 75 all-time player. And he looked great. But, like, I thought OG, once again, their most impactful defender. And honestly, was he their maybe not their most impactful offensive player tonight. We're going to get to that. But certainly their best in terms of execution. 24 points on 16 shots, and just everything you could possibly want from that spot. Not to be outdone, first triple-double of the season, tip of the cap to Josh Hart. I tweeted during the fourth quarter, this is a Josh Hart game if there ever was one. Can we, and look, before I say this, I'm going to acknowledge, me and Benji just recorded a pod in which we were like, we both had the thought, should Josh Hart move to the bench just to get Deuce McBride in the starting five? Not for offensive purposes, though. Just so he could be at the point of attack defensively and be pestersome there and move Macau off the ball a little bit. For anybody who's interested in more of that discussion, look at the exchange that DJ Zulo and Benji had on Twitter today, in which they kind of arrived at the point that we arrived at on the pod, which is like, there are too many reasons not to move Josh Hart out of the starting lineup. And I'm now going to say the thing that I was going to say before. Can we all sit back and acknowledge that, like, it's kind of ridiculous that was ever a question? He does so many things for this team that are absolutely necessary, and God, where would they be without him? Led the team in rebounds, or excuse me, one short of the team leading rebounds, 12 rebounds, a generous 10 assists, but still 10 assists. Did have the 4 turnovers. Those kind of come with the territory. You live with it. 14 points. He 6 of 6 from, or excuse me, 5 of 5 from inside the arc. He's the best shooter in basketball, regardless of position, from 2-point range, which is not a thing I thought I would be saying about Josh Hart. He has just another outstanding Josh Hart game. He was everywhere. He did everything. And then the third guy I'm going to mention in this exclusive category, and these are going to be my 3 stars of the game in some order, Deuce McBride. Deuce McBride, 6 of 12 from the field, 3 of 8 from deep, 15 points, couple assists, couple steals. This is kind of just like an average game now for Deuce. Like, I think this is just what he is. A guy who comes in and he plays like a starter. He's the equivalent of a starter. He's certainly good enough to be a starter. He'd start on a lot of teams in the league, I think. Maybe not a lot of teams in the league. He'd start on a good number of teams in the league. And he gives the Knicks everything they need. Jaylen Brunson can't go for the first however many minutes of the third quarter. Deuce McBride step in. It's like different player, obviously, than Jaylen Brunson. Very different player in many respects. But he is the baseline now with him is so high, and he is so freaking dependable. And I think, I saw somebody tweeted it before. I think he's going to have a real 6-man of the year case. I really do. If nobody gets hurt and he winds up coming off the bench the entire season, because he's going to average 26, 27, 28 minutes a game. I don't know what he's averaging as far as scoring right now. I'll look it up. It's probably somewhere around 12, 13 points. So the scoring is a little low. He's not that sort of microwave scorer that's going to come off the bench, and he's not going to be one of these guys who averaging 11.2 points a game. So probably a little low, but he's not a microwave scorer, but he does a lot on the other end too. And he does a lot of little things. So I think he should absolutely be in the running for that. And even though those were the top 3, I really thought there were contributions from really everybody. Karl-Anthony Towns, the way he came out to set the tone in the first quarter with his shooting, certainly. But I thought, and if I was going to do a one big takeaway for this game, cheers to all my Juan Please heads out there. it would be Karl-Anthony Towns on the defensive end of the floor. And I get it. Joel is not Joel yet. I thought Towns took on the challenge of just being a competent defender tonight. Was there a silly foul or two? Sure. Did they get maybe a little fortunate on that call overturn? We're going to get back to that in a bit. Maybe. But if Karl-Anthony Towns defends like this, you're going to sign up for that 7 days a week and twice on Sunday, because even when he's not scoring at such a prolific rate, and I say that about a guy who had 21 points on 16 shots, but like his offense after the first quarter, like kind of subsided a little bit. His impact on the game and the shots that he's like, how many times did we see OG Anunoby rumble in for open dunks? And that's all, whether a direct or an indirect result of Towns being on the floor at the center position. And that's the key. Because if he could just defend adequately, you could play him at the 5 with what he does on the other end, on the offensive end of the floor, and the impact that he has. His passing, I don't know which was prettier. The pass to Josh Hart for what felt like the dagger, or the I don't even know what the hell it was, behind the head pass to Mikal Bridges after that. Like, this guy's got like real serious passing chops, and you saw those plays and you saw what he's able to do, and it really does make you think, man, there's a world where he is an expanded version of what Hartenstein kind of became over the second half of last year. He's not as good a passer as Hartenstein. That said, Hartenstein turned the ball over a lot too. So, and he's obviously not the offensive threat to shoot or score that Towns is. So I'm excited to see more of that. It was great. I was talking before the game. Shout out to Autograph for hosting a locker room. And I was like, man, one thing we haven't seen this year a lot of is real chemistry developing between Towns and Bridges. Well, what do we get tonight? We got some nice chemistry between Towns and Bridges. Made a few plays together, nice connections. I want to see more of that. Speaking of Mikal Bridges, I thought this was a really nice game for him. I thought defensively was a really nice game. And I know 0-2 from behind the arc. It's okay to be a little nervous about that. I think he's shooting under 30% from 3 now this year. Not ideal. But his mid-range game is automatic. And if you are an offense that has a night, and I'm getting to the Brunson part of it, where your leading guy, your head of the snake, he just doesn't have it, and you got to find buckets. Having a guy like Mikal Bridges with the ability to just get to, whether it's 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet, even 14 feet, and just have that be pretty automatic. I don't know what he's shooting from that distance. It certainly hasn't been. I'll look it up, but I know it's above 50%. He's been killing it from the mid-range this year, and he's been excellent. Another excellent night there. I'll say Brunson for last. Campaign, good to have him back. Matt Ryan, good to see him in the rotation. I'm sure a lot of people are going to make the point that Tibbs expanded his rotation and the guys weren't tired in the fourth quarter. So lo and behold, the coach got it and figured out how to coach NBA basketball in his, his 14th year of coaching. So, congratulations, Tibbs, and to all those people who obviously knew better. And Jericho Sims, really nice game from Jericho Sims. And I don't say that, she's like really nice game from Jericho Sims. I thought, we played 10 minutes. They were a quality 10 minutes. Let's end by talking about Brunson. So Brunson was 0-4 from deep. He is now 1 for I think he's made like 1 or 2 threes in his last 3 games. He's gotten a little cold from long range. The most I've said this about another game earlier this year. I'll say it again. As un-Brunson a game as you're ever going to see. He was careless with the ball. He wasn't making shots. All of that sort of stuff. For him to come back and credit to Stan Van Gundy, said it on the broadcast. For him to come back in that game when he was having that kind of a night and go out there, and I know it wasn't all pretty after he came back, but this game was a game in the fourth quarter. And Brunson made some important baskets there along the way to get them to the finish line. I mean, the dude finished with 18 points, miraculously finished with 18 points on more points than shot attempts, which I didn't think was going to be possible at some point. Managed to get to the line 8 times. What is? I mean, old reliable. He could always do that. I give Brunson a lot of credit for finishing the game the way he did after that was through 2 quarters, especially, and even if you want to throw in a little bit of the third, as bad a game as you're ever going to see Jaylen Brunson play. And the sum total of it, we look at a team that was not making threes tonight, 9 of 31 from deep, that did not have their best player at his best tonight, and that was doing just some of the absolute silliest shit you could ever imagine through 3 quarters. And they overcame those 3 things, and they overcame a really outstanding game from a guy on the other team who was the best player on the floor tonight, and Paul George. With all due respect to everything the various Knicks did, Paul George was the best player on the floor. That's dare I say, that was a gritty win. And whether it was a gritty win or not, it was certainly an impressive win. I think so. For as much as they did wrong, and for as bad as they were in certain areas, I think that was an important win, which gets me to, of course, our autograph moment of the game. And I was being a little facetious about Tom Thibodeau before. Give Tom Thibodeau this. The man knows when to issue a challenge. And I bring that up now because our autograph signature moment of the game, presented, of course, by our friends at Autograph, was his challenge on the Karl-Anthony Towns double headbutt. It wasn't even one headbutt. He went forward and then he went back. He was like a wrestling heel in that moment. He took out 2 guys with one swing of the noggin. And the fact that one of them was Joel Embiid made it all the better. Originally called a foul, Tibbs challenges, it gets overturned, ends up in another possession, and lo and behold, Deuce McBride, there he was, maybe the biggest shot of the game in terms of the momentum and really solidifying the Knicks, because the Knicks never turned back after that. It went from a 5-point lead to an 8-point lead, and then followed by a very nice Jaylen Brunson finish, and then a Jaylen Brunson steal. So he showed up when you needed him, Jaylen Brunson. That is our autograph signature moment of the game. Remember, if you want to get rewarded for your fandom, yes, get rewarded for all the things that you already do. Reading my newsletter, listening to our podcast, going and interacting with your favorite content creators like me. I had a great locker room chat before this game, so that was fun. Go over to the Autograph app, download it, say you're a Knicks fan, start doing stuff, get rewards, get perks. It is quite the thing that they have invented over there at Autograph. So you can find that link in my bio. You can, of course, enter code KFS and help us out that way as well.